Thank you very much for coming today. I'm very excited that you're here talking about one of my favorite topics, which happens to be ethics and ethical considerations, particularly for those of us in this field of advancement work. Working in the field, we often encounter some ethical situations, and certainly we run into that sometimes with our donors. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about ethics. And let's start with back thousands of years ago with the Greeks. Ethos, from the Greek word meaning character or the ideal of character manifested by a race or a people. So fast forward to 2005, when the Association for Fundraising Professionals developed a statement of ethics. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that came about. And what they wrote in this think tank was that ethics is really the discipline that deals with what's good or bad, right or wrong, a moral duty or an obligation. It's a group of moral principles or a set of values that conduct then the governing of an individual or a profession. And so for us in advancement, it's our ethics, and this is what we subscribe to. In addition to AFP developing their statement, a year prior, CASE, which is the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education, they wrote an elaborate paper on ethics as well. And I pulled from that some of the key areas that they in fact were talking about. From personal integrity, public trust, disclosure, today we'd probably call that transparency, to inform, involve, advance the institution. All the kinds of things that we have an ethical responsibility to do. And then the independent sector wrote in 2004 around their values and code of ethics that in fact it's adhering to the highest ethical standards in the work we do. It's the right thing to do. It's the way in which we are given the opportunity to carry out the mission, and that is a trust that is given to us when we work in this profession and when we work with our boards and our donors in this area. And then obviously, ethically, we need to make certain that we steward those resources the most effective way, in a way that absolutely carries out the mission, the vision, and the strategic direction of our organization. So some of these then become demonstrated around integrity, honesty, fairness, again, respect and responsibility. These will be key words that you hear over and over. And when you talk and debate, it's really interesting to have that conversation, even with a colleague, about your integrity. What does that mean? What does that mean to you? How far will you go? Where's the slope? Where's the line, so to speak? So I want to start this conversation with Grace Steller. Grace is a graduate of the class of 1974 from Case College, which is a small private liberal arts college here in the Northeast. And she and two of her siblings attended Case College. Grace has been one of the three that's gone on to do, very entrepreneurial. She has her own business. She's in the Fortune 500. And she talks with her siblings, and they decide that they're really interested in doing something that will honor their mother, who has been a staunch supporter of women's rights, from voting to economic rights to breaking the glass ceiling, a number of those issues. And so Grace has this gift officer with whom she's working from her college. And so the gift officer has, of course, known who Grace is and met with Grace over a period of time and has come to learn of her interests. Well, at Case College, they want to start a center for women's leadership. So obviously we've got a great fit with what Grace and her siblings want to do, with what it is the institution wants to do. And what better than joyful giving with warm hands? So Grace talks with the gift officer and he explains that this will be something in which there'll be an executive director hired. It's a project that they've been looking at now that they have a funding source, potentially. This will speed this process up all the more. And that over the next 2 years, indeed, there'll be a center for leadership, women's leadership. And so the president and the provost have weighed in, and they've informed that they will go out and do a national search, bring someone in on this topic that can really, move this along a trajectory that perhaps otherwise might not be available and accessible. So the gift officers informed all of these decisions and the conversations back and forth, and the gift officer has even brought the provost and the president to meet. So they go through everything, they've agreed to what the terms are, they're down to the last, and Grace then says, I know we're going to have a board of advisors. I want to make certain and have it written in that one of our family members will always in perpetuity serve on this board. What do you think? Ethical? Unethical?
I don't see an inherent conflict of interest in that.
Okay.
They're not asking for control.
Right.
They're asking to participate.
Great. Thank you. Good answer. So let's talk for a minute, though, and go back to, if you recall, the ethical statements from our profession. They were written in like 02, 03, 04, 05. Well, while we may have had some statements of ethics prior to that, here's some things that really kicked off this topic. You might remember 9/11, and you might well remember that there were over $2 billion that the American Red Cross collected. There was great controversy on the distribution of those funds. So 60% of the residents watched that controversy and became a little stymied by that, a little turned off by what was not happening with the funds, particularly around something that had really shaken the very fiber of this country. What was found was that confidence fell from what was around 25% to 18% in just a very short period of time. For those who said they had lost or were losing confidence in charitable organizations. If indeed American Red Cross was emblematic of others, it was really shaking the ground. And for those that were losing confidence, it went from 8 up to 17. So it's kind of an inverse, but basically that is what was happening. So in 2003, a firm, Burke and Associates, undertook a survey to look at donor confidence. They surveyed well over 267 charities, 150 individuals, as well as foundations, and they wanted to know what would it take to improve your confidence in the ability of charitable organizations to disperse the funds. And so some of the factors that they found is that almost 70% would definitely or would consider increasing and expanding if the quality of the communication was improved. And if they knew, then here's what they said. If we know first that our gift was received, we know fundamentally that the very first thing of why a donor makes a gift, belief in mission. The second reason why people give, they were asked. So, belief in mission, and they were asked. They write their check, they send it off, and what is it that they want to know? Did you get my check? Did you get the transfer of funds? Did you transfer it on the day you received the stock funds? And if so, what was the value? Because I know what the value was according to my stockbroker. Those are the kinds of things that donors want to know and know immediately. They want to know that their gift then is set to work right away. And they really expect to know what the program results are in how you said that they were going to be. So we can't begin to promise what we know we can't deliver on, or that we're not thinking about how we longitudinally track those things. So donors then also said in the same survey that 86 would give and continue to give if they received feedback on what it was their gift was doing and how it was helping. 70% would definitely or probably increase if the quality of communication was improved. So again, we're talking about a two-way communication, a belief in mission. Tell me how my money is working, what is it doing, and what are we achieving? So that's from the donor perspective. We also were interested in learning from advancement professionals, folks like us who work in this field. And what are some of the dilemmas, some of the controversial, some of the ethical things that we may find in what we do? So quickly, some were concerned about sharing information about a donor with volunteers. How much do we share with our board of trustees about a gift that was received? Is it the gift only? Is it the circumstances behind? Do we have a tendency to want to share a real inside perspective, and perhaps that might not be as ethical as it should or as it sounds. We want to make certain that behavior that all of our staff members do is professionally, and that's done with both with donors and with other volunteer leaders in our organizations. Some of our advancement professionals, obviously this tended to be more with women, found gender issues and ethics around some of the things that were happening when a woman would meet with a man donor, for example. That was a common one. And so how does someone extricate from a setting? How does one know dinner, is not, how do you say when a donor says, let's meet for dinner or let's meet for a drink? How do you handle that? So those were some of the things there. And then really fulfilling the donor intentions, making certain that what the donor asked for and what we agreed is going to do it. Some of us are concerned about hedging with donor on some of the issues. We think we can't, how do we spin something if it's not so good? If that stock didn't get transferred for 2 days and it went down, how do we spin that? Responding to donors' questions and inquiries. How do we answer the questions? And then advising donors on how their gifts were spent. So these were some of the things that advancement professionals were talking about as challenges ethically in our profession. So let's go back to Grace and her gift, along with her siblings, to Case College. So we know that it's not an issue for Grace or a member of the family to sit on the Board of Advisors. They've agreed they're going to be doing a national search. The institute will open in 2 years, etc. Grace and the president are talking about the dedication and the opening of this center. And they want to have a keynote speaker. So the two of them decide on who that speaker might be. And they invite the speaker, and the speaker agrees to come. When it's announced, now I know many of you would not ever think this to happen, people on campus were not happy. There were demonstrations. They were encouraged to rescind that invitation to that speaker. They did not believe that that was the proper place and time for that individual speaker to be on campus, on and on. So the president and Grace sit down and convene. The president urges her to agree to let him rescind the invitation to the speaker. He thinks that wouldn't be a problem because he, of course, has to be on campus forever and ever, at least he thinks. What are the ethics behind something like that? Is that the right thing to do? Is that the ethical thing to do? If you're not doing this with your staff, I highly recommend at least once a quarter bringing up these ethical dilemmas. And as someone said to me a long time ago, talk about it at the top of the hill, not while it's rolling down. So I would highly recommend that we spend time doing that. So what we've had to do over these years, over the last decade or so, is to rebuild confidence with our donors. And how might we do that? Well, first, we need to mount an aggressive effort to explain our organization to our donors. We need to make certain that when we agree to something, that we have the capacity to measure the impact. It's not acceptable any longer to say, these young women or these students, when they go on, they will do this and this and this. How do we know that? How are we going to measure that? If we're going to say it, we've got to have a plan in place to measure. We need to address poor performance wherever it might be. Some of us have standards that if you receive a gift at whatever level, the gift receipt, gift acknowledgement is out in 48 hours. No exceptions. None. Letters may go out at different levels for signature based on level of gift. That needs to be set and kept in place. If we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, we need to address it. Start a stewardship committee. Many of us have development committees, and mostly what development committees are always doing is how they're going to raise the next dollar, how they're going to get more leadership gifts, how they're going to upgrade, how they're going to get grants. And as much as we want to make sure we're stewarding those that have given, we generally aren't doing a good job of that. And so setting a separate stewardship committee is often a very good way to do that, where that focus is completely on them. And make accountability visits. I love this one. After a donor has made a significant gift and you've talked with them about it, go in person. Share with them the story. Bring a student, bring a faculty member. Let them know the story and make those kinds of accountability visits where you're doing it in person. Assess and upgrade your stewardship program. Obviously, there's plenty of opportunities to do that, ways to do it. Conduct survey with your donors at least once every 2 years. How are we doing? And list the different areas. Are you satisfied? Are you not satisfied? Let us know. And those are some of the things that we can do to begin to rebuild that confidence as we think about our group organizationally and what we're doing around ethics. So Grace, the final thing is, Grace, her siblings, Grace served on the committee of the advisory board. The kickoff was the speaker, in fact, who they wanted, and they had the largest opening of a center at this particular college in a long time. It was well attended, well received, and they're probably on to their next gift of endowing the chair for that. And that's because they confronted some of these very critical issues. So as we conclude, ethics is obviously singularly important to what we do. It's fundamental to who we are. We've got to promise on our word. And so talking about it within the staff, making certain that you are talking about it with your donors, those are very critical things. And then key, and lastly, making certain that not only are we in the advancement area talking about it, but indeed our vice presidents, our presidents, and our board. They need to be involved in this ethical conversation as well. So thank you for being here today.